We're kicking off today with CM Punk, who suffered a torn triceps injury during the Men's Royal Rumble match, an injury that Drew McIntyre has been happy to take credit for. Now, PW Insider reports that CM Punk was at the WWE Performance Center this week working on getting cleared by the medical team, as he hopes to be back in the ring very soon. Despite his injury, Punk has remained a significant presence on WWE programming, often interfering in McIntyre's attempts to become World Heavyweight Champion. It's rumored that the two might finally clash at SummerSlam, although Punk hasn't been cleared yet, but that hasn't stopped anticipation building towards Punk's return to the ring. When Stephanie Vaquer signed with WWE, it was Shawn Michaels who broke the news online, as the head of NXT was the first to welcome the CMLL alum to the WWE family. Vaquer has since said that she'll see the NXT roster soon, suggesting she'll be competing in the Gold brand first, but she did come close to becoming All Elite. On the K100 podcast, sports reporter and Las Vegas Raiders radio announcer Harry Ruiz claimed that Stephanie Vaquer had returned to Mexico to sign a deal with AEW. When Michaels learned of this, he contacted Vaquer and laid out WWE's plans for her, as well as a huge contract that she was happy to sign. He explained, "So here's where I got some sources that got me some information, and they tell me that at the time AEW had a very significant offer for her and that they were very close to closing the deal. Then WWE was made aware of that contract that day, and she returned to Mexico with signing with AEW in her mind. But she ended up getting a call from somebody very important in WWE. I'll just say it, Shawn Michaels, called her personally. Instead of having somebody call her, Shawn Michaels called her and then ended up laying out a plan for what they were going to do with her, and then a good monetary offer as well. So she ended up accepting WWE because they had the money, they had the creative, and it made more sense for her, even if this means that she doesn't get to work with New Japan and CMLL no more." Little is known about Vaquer's contract, though sources have indicated that it is similar to what Julia is getting in NXT, as she is also expected to join the Gold brand very soon. It was Vaquer who dethroned Julia as NJPW Strong Women's Champion earlier this year, and now fans can expect to see both women in NXT in the not-so-distant future. Over to AEW Dynamite now, as the show's 250th episode saw Will Ospreay put his international title on the line against MJF, and no one could have expected what was to come. The match opened the show and saw a clash of styles as MJF tried to evade and counter the high-octane offense of Ospreay and targeted his attack on the knees and shoulders of the Brit. In fact, at one point of the match, Ospreay's shoulder was seemingly dislocated, and a member of the medical team had to pop it back in place, earning gasps from the AEW crowd. Speaking of which, the action went into the crowd, and there was a humorous spot where Ospreay invited a 7-year-old fan to hit some punches on the former AEW World Champion. As the match continued, neither man was able to put their opponent away, and as this continued, the bout got closer and closer to its 1-hour time limit. Towards the end, Ospreay seemingly had the match won and contemplated finishing the job with the Tiger Driver 91, a move he is trying to remove from his arsenal as it's too dangerous. Ospreay thought better of using the move, which would cost him dearly, as after taking out the referee, MJF used the Dynamite Diamond Ring on Will and got the win with seconds to spare. This was a huge match for both men, and clearly an exhausting one, as after his win, MJF donned an oxygen mask to help his body recover from the war he'd been through. This was actually a throwback to MJF's hour-long Iron Man match at AEW Revolution 2023, which saw him use an oxygen mask at one point in his battle with Bryan Danielson. MJF would use the oxygen tank on that night to gain the advantage, but this time, it was the Dynamite Diamond Ring that sealed Ospreay's fate. Interestingly enough, MJF was still getting some cheers despite turning heel again recently, as even at his worst, the new international champion proves immensely popular. At this time, there's no word on whether MJF or Ospreay suffered any injuries in the match, but after competing for close to an hour, both wrestlers have earned some time to recover. But what did you think of the match and MJF being the new international champion? Let us know in the comments section below. In February 2022, Cody Rhodes shocked fans when he and Brandi left AEW, especially considering some of the things he'd said and done during his time with the company. Cody infamously destroyed a Triple H-inspired throne with a sledgehammer at Double or Nothing 2019, and at the time, many felt Cody had crumbled any chance of a WWE return. That obviously was not the case, and on the Insight podcast, Rhodes said that despite being an EVP in AEW, he knew that his time with the company would not last forever. He said, "I just remember AEW lovingly, and I also knew I was leaving. I knew it was a season, and I knew there was something greater for me out there. And I know that might sound negative to people, but it's not. That's the biggest prize in the wrestling game." The something greater Rhodes alludes to has been his return to WWE, where he has been a top star and, unlike in AEW, has been embraced by the fans. Now Rhodes has finished his story and become undisputed WWE champion, and while he appreciates his time with AEW, his time with the company was never going to be permanent. Right now, few wrestlers are more popular than Joe Hendry, and with the responses he's been getting on NXT, many have speculated on whether he'll join WWE when his TNA deal expires. We can't say for sure if Hendry will join WWE full-time down the line, but if that is a move he's planning to make, fans shouldn't expect it just yet. On Talk is Jericho, Hendry reflected on the duration of his TNA contract, and though he didn't give specifics, he made clear that there's significant time left on his deal. He said, "We've got a while, but because of the working relationship, I really feel like anything is possible. I'm very thankful to TNA management. Anytime, not once have I gone to them with an opportunity, and not once have they said no. I've gone to them and said, I think this would be great. They always support me. There was a time recently I went to TNA, they had some big matches for me coming up, and I said, I want to go to Orlando and I want to train with Ace Steel and Natalya and Tyson Kidd. I'm going to go. If you want to help me facilitate this, I would appreciate it. They said, what can we do to help? Whenever I've tried to invest in myself, TNA has helped me do that. They've been behind me all the way. They're very giving to the ideas and opportunities that present themselves. I really feel like anything is on the table." Hendry appeared on last week's episode of NXT as well as this week and said in a backstage segment with Gallus that he'll be sticking around and likes things in the gold brand. Could Joe Hendry join WWE full-time one day? It's possible, but for now, the Scottish star seems more than happy being a top draw in both TNA and NXT. Now, Asuka has been off of TV since the Backlash PLE in May and underwent surgery in early June, with fans wishing for a speedy recovery for the former women's champion. Next week, WWE will embark on a brief tour of Japan with 3 dates from July 25th to July 27th, with the opening show being at the Edion Arena in Osaka. Nights 2 and 3 will take place at the Ryugoku Arena in Tokyo, and interestingly, Asuka has been promoted for the tour, though in a non-wrestling role. Instead of competing in her homeland, Asuka is set to accompany Damage Control for their 6-woman tag matches against Jade Cargill, Bianca Belair, and Meiko Satomura. These matches will mark Satomura's return to the ring as, despite not being injured, WWE hasn't used her since she fought Roxanne Perez in March of last year. There is no word yet on when Asuka will return to in-ring action, but with her potential for another title run and her veteran presence being valuable, fans are hoping to see a speedy recovery. It's been over 2 years since Big E last competed for WWE, as his career has been derailed by a broken neck, but the former WWE champion remains positive about his future. Speaking to Chris Vanini on Getting Over, Big E gave an update on his neck injury and revealed what it'll take for him to finally get back in the ring. He said, "Now we're at 2 years and running since I broke my neck. I broke my C1 in 2 places, my C6 as well. I feel great. I have no issues with pain, no issues with discomfort, weakness, any of those things. My strength is great. The only issue is my C1 is healing fibrously, which is great for normal day-to-day life, but it's not turning into new bone and ossifying yet. They're not going to clear me until that happens. It's obviously a very important bone. Right now, that's the waiting game. I did go to Cancun about a month ago for stem cells. We'll see if that changes anything. Right now, I feel great. I'm just not in a position to be cleared quite yet." While questions remain as to whether Big E will wrestle again, he has been able to make peace with the possibility that his in-ring career is over and is pleased to be pain-free after what happened. These days, Big E can be found on PLE kickoff shows as well as doing talent scouting, but for now, another match by the New Day member remains far from being a certainty. Since making their debut last month, the Wyatt 6 has been a centerpiece of Raw programming, but for all the interest from fans, the group has yet to have a match. On this week's Raw, Bo Dallas was attacked by Chad Gable and the Creed brothers, but this segment was far from a home run as far as Bully Ray is concerned. On the Busted Open Radio podcast, the Hall of Famer raised doubts about the group's presentation and whether the faction can keep its momentum. He explained, "Last night was the first night we've seen Bo Dallas, not Uncle Howdy, Bo Dallas, the brother of Bray Wyatt, the brother of Wyndham Rotunda, the closest living link WWE has to Bray. We see him live and in the flesh last night. So-so reaction. To me, that's concerning. I'm concerned about the Wyatt Six once they make their way into the arena. When the lights go out and you hear the noises and you see the smoke, everybody's like, ooh, especially because this is a new gimmick and you're seeing it for the first time, but we've seen it play through." WWE has invested a lot of time into the faction, which had been teased since the Raw after WrestleMania 40, so it's hardly a surprise that expectations are high as to whether it works. Ultimately, time will tell if Bo and his allies can deliver in the ring when matches start happening, and do you agree with what Bully has to say? Sound off down in the comments. Back to Dynamite, and the main event was a non-title showdown of World Champ Swerve Strickland and Continental Champion Kazuchika Okada just 1 week before Blood and Guts. A textbook lockup sequence transitioned into a series of counters and takedowns, and Prince Nana had the crowd firmly behind Swerve, infuriating Okada. The Japanese star channeled this anger to take control, and the physicality of the bout only grew as the match went on, with both men hungry for the win. Since the show had an overrun, they were able to have enough time so nothing felt rushed, but unfortunately that didn't mean we got to see a clean finish. Instead, the Young Bucks attacked Swerve to kick off a brawl that brought out everyone who will compete in Blood and Guts next week. Adam Page was the final man on Team Elite to arrive, but he didn't get to get his hands on Swerve yet due to Okada dragging the AEW champion out of the ring. Darby Allin lowered from the rafters in a nod to Sting and revealed that he'll be the final member of Team AEW in what should be a violent match between some of the best in AEW. When it was learned that Ricochet would not be re-signing with WWE, fans immediately speculated that he'd join AEW and fit in with the high-energy style of many on the roster. Now Ricochet is officially a free agent, and in an interview with comicbook.com, AEW president Tony Khan had plenty of praise for the work of the inaugural WWE Speed Champion. Khan said he's a huge fan of Ricochet as an in-ring performer and credited his history and success in New Japan, where Ricochet battled some of the top names currently in AEW. After becoming a free agent on July 1st, it was reported that Ricochet is likely headed to AEW and that talks between the two sides were well underway. Fans are eagerly awaiting Ricochet's next move, anticipating his potential impact on AEW should the negotiations go well with Tony Khan and his company. What are your thoughts on Tony Khan crediting Ricochet as a top attraction? Would we see Ricochet debuting in AEW soon? Sound off in the comments. The last time fans saw Sammy Guevara, it was back in February, as after a match with Jeff Hardy, he was suspended for not following protocol when it was feared Jeff had a concussion. While Jeff ultimately did not have a concussion, Sammy should have stopped the match temporarily to allow medics to check on Hardy, and not doing so resulted in the suspension. Although Jeff left AEW over a month ago, Sammy has yet to be brought back to TV, and there's been discussions behind the scenes about his status. Fightful Select reports that Guevara's return has been a topic of discussion, especially as his suspension ended months ago and he simply hasn't been appearing on TV. Guevara's last match was a highly praised no DQ match against Powerhouse Hobbs that took place after the Hardy match, and Guevara is expected to reappear on AEW TV soon. Sammy won't get his rematch with Jeff as he and Matt are in TNA, but not under contract, and time will tell what Guevara does when he is eventually brought back to TV. If you've seen Bron Breakker on Raw as of late, you'll have witnessed his speed firsthand as he has been delivering explosive offense, often outside of the ring. Breakker gives himself a run-up before spearing the likes of Sami Zayn and Ilya Dragunov, but are these ringside attacks a bit too similar to Braun Strowman? On his Click This podcast, Kevin Nash brought up that Braun has often used a similar ringside attack and had some advice for WWE. He said, "I tell you one thing they have to stop doing is they have to stop doing the spot where Braun Strowman runs around the ring and mows over people. You can't have that, and Braun's doing the same thing when one of them's a fucking 4.1, 4.0 guy." While Strowman might not have Breakker's speed or current momentum, he could argue for keeping his mow-down spot, which has been a part of his arsenal for much longer than Braun. However, Strowman hasn't achieved significant success since returning from injury in May, and Braun has been the superstar WWE is clearly more interested in elevating. Perhaps a Braun versus Braun match could help settle who deserves this particular ringside attack more. And what do you make of Kevin Nash's comments? Let us know down below. We've got some video game news now, as Rhea Ripley made history by being part of the first all-female cover of WWE 2K24, but now Mommy is stepping into the world of Call of Duty. In a trailer for Call of Duty Season 5, Ripley is a playable character and can be seen using weapons including guns and a sledgehammer to defeat enemies. This trailer also features a wrestling ring setting and wrestling moves being used, and comes after it was reported that WWE talent would be featured in the game. Ripley probably wouldn't mind using those weapons on Liv Morgan and perhaps Dominic Mysterio, but for now, fans will get to see Mommy get downright violent in Call of Duty. For years, Mason Madden and Mansoor were part of WWE, and while their male models gimmick proved popular with fans, that didn't stop them being released in September 2023. In a recent conversation with Sean Ross Sapp, the pair discussed the pay structure of WWE, with Mace stating that the base pay is generous, but it limits earnings from outside projects. He said, "I think the downside is very generous, but it's designed in such a way that if you're doing very well on the outside, then you kinda still get what you were going to get." During the interview, Mansoor humorously recounted his initial intent to criticize WWE, only to change his tone after receiving a royalties check. He quipped, "I was ready to do the interview and bury WWE, but then the royalties check hit. I love the Fed. It's all about the game and how you play it." While the pair appreciate the royalty checks, the tag team has since signed with Ring of Honor and has already been promoted for the show. It remains to be seen how the pair will be used, but with reports of greater care being taken with ROH Creative, the pair could be on course for quite the impact in Tony Khan's second promotion. Speaking of WWE alums signing with Tony Khan, it was back in 2022 that Samoa Joe joined the company, while Adam Copeland would make his arrival at the inaugural Dynasty show last October. Since then, both men have held championships in AEW and have been part of high-profile feuds, and the pair are also proving to be assets with their attitudes. That's according to Tony Schiavone, who shared on his What Happened When podcast that he wishes more wrestlers had an attitude similar to Joe and Copeland. "I say this a million times, if everybody in wrestling had the attitude of Edge, Adam Copeland, and Samoa Joe, we would all be millionaires. Never seen two guys with a better attitude in my life. Just professional, absolutely. But that's not a knock on anybody else, but those are the two that come to mind. They're the best." While Copeland may have a great attitude in AEW, he won't be competing anytime soon, as an injury suffered at Forbidden Door has kept him out of action and ended his TNT title reign. As for Samoa Joe, he was written off TV recently with an attack by the Learning Tree, but that won't stop him, or Copeland, from having a great approach to being part of AEW. Since joining AEW in 2021, Paul Wight has competed just a handful of times for the promotion, with his most recent match on AEW TV coming in November of last year. This week, Wight took to Instagram and gave an update on his health, stating that he has had both knees and hips replaced and is now in no pain. Wight shared a photo of himself in the gym and said he's working hard to get into a shape that isn't egg-shaped, suggesting that his days in the ring aren't over quite yet. While Paul's most recent AEW match was last year, he did compete on Chris Jericho's cruise in January 2024, and time will tell when we see the Giant back in the squared circle. On June 15th, Too Cold Scorpio was arrested after an altercation with another man at a gas station, and as a result, a GoFundMe has been launched to cover his medical bills. Shirley Black, Scorpio's significant other, has launched the GoFundMe, as the incident has left Scorpio unable to work his full-time job as a security officer, which was his main source of income. Scorpio can't return to work in security unless he's cleared of the charges against him, and will continue to follow this serious situation for any further updates. In May of this year, the Tonga twins announced they had left WOW Women of Wrestling and went on to claim the company was evil and that talent were too scared to speak up. Since then, there's been speculation as to where they'll go next, and this week, the twins shared a photo from inside the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, Florida. While this shouldn't be seen as proof that they've signed, it's certainly interesting that they're at the PC, and many in the comments of their tweet were hoping a deal had been reached. Outside of WOW, the twins appeared on AEW Dark twice in 2021 but lost both matches, And could their futures be as WWE superstars? Time will tell. More from AEW Dynamite 250 now, as Chris Jericho, Big Bill, and Brian Keith were on the show, and Jericho berated Little Rock, Arkansas, while alluding to its crime rate. Jericho vowed to continue being a mainstay of Dynamite moving forward and listed the recent actions of the Learning Tree, stating that people will stop getting hurt when they learn their lessons. Before he could go much further, though, Jericho was confronted by Minoru Suzuki, who was last seen on Dynamite in June when he rejected Chris's offer to team at Forbidden Door. Suzuki had a document in hand which revealed that not only will Jericho defend his FTW title against him next week, but that Bill and Keith are banned from ringside. Suzuki headbutted Jericho to send a message, and we'll have to see if the Japanese legend can win his first title in AEW next week. It was on last week's Dynamite that Darby Allin attacked Brandon Cutler in an effort to get the attention of Jack Perry, and the TNT champion responded on the latest show. Speaking to the camera backstage, Perry spoke about Allin's attack on Cutler and launched an attack of his own on Brandon, who's been a long-term associate of the Young Bucks. As we said, Allin will be the final member of Team AEW against the Elite in Blood and Guts, and don't be surprised if next week's match builds to a TNT title showdown between the two. Mercedes Moné was on Dynamite to put her TBS title on the line against Nyla Rose, who, despite having the power advantage, found herself on defense early in the match. Rose turned things around by countering a tornado DDT and yelled at Moné for even considering the move, and from there, the match was a more back-and-forth exchange. Wanting to get under Britt Baker's skin, Moné pulled out a glove just like the DMD uses before applying the lockjaw, and while Rose tried to escape by biting Moné, it proved futile. Post-match, Moné began yelling at a fan in a Sting mask, who shoved Mercedes to the ground and revealed themselves to be none other than Britt Baker. Baker chased Moné before security kept the two separate, as while the CEO was able to avoid defending against Britt last night, it appears these two are destined to wrestle soon. Mariah May emerged on Dynamite dressed as Toni Storm to address last week's attack and criticized Storm for being so desperate for the spotlight she failed to see she's losing it. May declared that her greatest performance will be at AEW All In 2024, where she plans to defeat her mentor and capture the AEW Women's World Championship in Wembley Stadium. Next month, AEW will return to the UK for their second annual All In pay-per-view, but fans wanting their fix of All Elite content won't have to wait until August 25th. Just one day earlier, AEW will host an All In celebration from Box Park at Wembley Stadium, and tickets are already available through Ticketmaster. It's unclear what exactly this celebration will look like, but in between this event, All In, Dynamite, and Collision in Wales, AEW is preparing to take the UK by storm next month. And we're ending with AEW, as the 250th edition of Dynamite may not have been loaded with matches, but the show had a little bit for everyone to enjoy. Swerve vs. Okada's DQ finish makes sense given blood and guts, but with that said, a non-finish in the main event is never ideal. The TBS title match was decent, but the match that will have fans talking was, of course, the hour-long international title match between Ospreay and MJF. Not only did they keep the crowd invested for almost an hour, but it ended with a title change nobody saw coming, and unpredictability is a rare commodity in the world of wrestling. Even the fans who were stunned also seemed intrigued as to what's to come, as MJF will no doubt hope to hold this title for at least as long as his record-breaking AEW World title reign. If there is any complaint that could be levied here, it's that AEW didn't feature enough talents who have been around for all 250 episodes in more significant ways, but all in all, this was an impressive show.